Hi, this is Dennis with Second Chance Tackle. We're continuing on these pandemic projects. This one is an interesting one. This is the Penn Mag Power 990. It has an adjustment for a mag spool for the casting. Shares a lot of parts with the Jigmaster, and it's a nice double ball bearing reel. And this one's got a little bit of a whine. This one also belongs to Patrick, who we just did the 10-0 Senator on. And he just asked me to tune it up, and we're going to clean it up, tune it up, and I'll show you how this reel is made. And if you have one of these reels, I'll show you what it takes to take this reel apart, service it, and get it back out there fishing again. So first thing I'm going to do is remove the exterior parts. While I do that, I want to thank all of our frontline workers involved in the pandemic, everybody who's had a role in trying to keep us safe or restore us to health. That includes the healthcare workers, the police, fire, EMT, but also the front lines and day-to-day things that we take for granted, like grocery store delivery and truck drivers and the like. Thank you for all it is that you're doing, sometimes putting your lives at risk to save ours. We really do appreciate that. Okay, we got the handle off. I'm going to take the star drag off, the adjuster. And this is a good time to tell you, if you don't know the reel, take pictures along the way. That way, as you go to reassemble a reel, if you get stuck anywhere, you can go back and reference your pictures. And I take pictures, of course, by doing this video, but if you like, take it on a cell phone camera, take it on a regular digital camera, heck, even take it on film if you like. But just know the assortment there. These are tension washers. They go under the star drag, and they control the tension of the pressure from the star drag. So these are not flat washers, they are concave, and you can see that there's a spacing. If I load it this way, that gives it a little bit more variability in that adjuster. These were nested, which means that they're face to face, which gives you less variability. And there's one more way you can do it. You can do it kind of polar opposites, where you have the gaps on both sides. But at any rate, these were nested, so they're going to go back in nested. Somebody had asked me a question the other day about what's the proper way to install them, and the answer is there's no improper way. It's all about a matter of feel. And I generally put them back in the way I found them, but if you want more sensitivity in your star adjuster, then cup them. If you want less, nest them, like was on this reel. Now, just cleaning up a little bit of the chrome pieces here. And I'm using steel wool, and I'm using a chrome polish. It's an automotive chrome polish. It's very mild abrasive, but it takes some of the tarnish off of these. It kind of restores them to health in a hurry, makes them nice and pretty. I'll do the same thing here. You can tell that there's just some accumulated stuff on here, so let's get that off and maybe just polish it up a little bit. Doesn't take much. And the chrome polish and the steel wool is just not that expensive. And I just want to make sure I get that steel wool off my case. I don't want that going into the real parts. But there you go. Without much effort, you can just kind of clean that up. And then we can get into the base of the reel here. So there's 4 bridge screws on the outside here. We want to take those off. So unlike a Jigmaster, this has a couple of different things going for it, but one of them that the Jigmaster has that this does not have is the quick one screw take apart system. This one's kind of bolted down, and I'm going to take these screws, I'm going to put them into a parts tray. You may notice it in the background, or it may be off camera, but I just use the bottom of the milk jug as a parts tray, and that way when I go to reinstall, I will know exactly where to find them. There should be 2 size screws on this one. There should be a short screw, 2 of them, and there should be a long screw. The 2 short ones go into the reel seat. This is the reel seat. And the 2 long ones go into the crossbars. In this case, it's got a single crossbar, so one of those is going to be attached inside, and one of them is going to be attached through the case. All right. Pull those out. We should be able to remove the side plate. Here is our case. These are the 2 screws that are holding the bar in there, and this is another 3rd screw for the reel seat. You don't have to remove this frame. We do want to make sure that it is clear. Underneath here you have two things going on. You have the bearing in the back, which we're going to make sure gets oiled, and you have the mag control over here. You don't need to do anything with the mag control, but the bearing you certainly want to make sure it's clean. Looks clean, but looks can be deceiving, so I'm just going to grab a little cotton swab here just to make sure that that's okay. I'm going to take some fishing reel oil. In this case, it's an aftermarket synthetic called Real-X. I'm just going to kind of flood that bearing because I'm going to assume that bearing hasn't been serviced in quite some time. And if you like, you can take a little bit of reel grease and put it on the click mechanism just so that it slides a little easier. I'm not sure if this click mechanism gets used because it has a nice sharp point here, and that's generally a good indication that it hasn't been doing too much. And while I have the spool off, I'm just going to see if I can't buff that inside a little bit. See if we can't get that clean or cleaner. And you can tell this one's been used in salt water because it has the greening across the crossbars here. So we'll see what we can do to kind of improve that a little bit. I guess if you wanted to, you could go get replacement bars. They're the Jigmaster bars. And if you didn't want to buy them new, you can probably find a nice set on eBay. So we cleaned that up. You want to clean the rim here. This rim is typically where a lot of the salt will deposit itself as it's coming off the line. And you want to do the same thing on the back. These are sometimes a little hard to reach, but again, if you like, you can use a cotton swab to get in there. But that rim is clean now, so we're in good condition with that. We buffed up the bottom reel seat, pretty much got that off. And those of you that are wondering what piece is running around here, that piece comes off of the bridge, and we're going to put that into the parts tray that fell out when I was going this way with that. Okay, there's little caps here that are holding a couple of those screws in, which is fine. The other one that came out belongs over here, and interestingly enough, that for whatever reason that didn't have that little cap on it. Alright, there's 4 bridge screws, so let's go ahead and take those off. Just going to put the spool in here for now. Actually, what we can do is we can clean that spool up. This is the rub pattern from the mag control. Don't worry about that too much, it's not scarred. There are no bearings in this spool, it's simply a matter of cleaning it up. Just getting rid of the grease that's on both sides of this. I'm going to use grease. I'm going to use Penn Precision Real Grease to refresh the 2 posts. Get a little bit onto the stud here. It's going to go inside the bearing. A little bit on here, which is going to go inside the pinion gear. And we can reinstall that spool. Just like that, reseat it, and just keep that off to the side in one piece. Alright, we have 4 screws here, so let's get busy on that. I'm just going to check to see what side our anti-reverse dog is on. Okay, I like to do this by keeping the free spool in the off position when I go to remove it. That way the jack doesn't get caught up as I push the bridge through. You'll notice I'm cupping my hand here. That's because there's a spring and an anti-reverse dog inside. I don't want to lose those. You don't typically lose the dog, but that spring has a habit of flying from time to time, so you want to make sure that you cup it, or you put it inside of a plastic bag, like a gallon Ziploc bag, and that way if it does shoot, it's contained within that. But typically if I do it this way, that spring doesn't have far to travel, so it doesn't get loose. Okay, the side plate is off. Turn that around right now. Here's your pinion gear. And here's that anti-reverse dog and spring I was referring to. And I know I get a lot of questions as pieces that come in on the comments about they've lost the spring and wanted to know, exactly how to go about replacing the spring or the like. That's it. This is your anti-reverse dog. I was just looking at orientation. It goes on the typical right side of the reel. And when we go to reinstall, we'll make sure it's there. Alrighty, I'm going to take the bridge assembly. I'm going to lay that down. I'm going to leave the across the pinion gear right there. I'm going to push in on the yoke to remove the jack. And a lot of these parts are shared with other reels, so this is kind of a hybrid. I'm looking at the eccentric. The eccentric's got the number 200 on it. The 200 is the old Surfmaster, small frame Surfmaster. There was a larger one, the 250. There's also a smaller frame one on 150. But that piece goes back forever, probably into the 40s. I'm just wondering if I see the marking on this one. I was going to say this looks like a similar setup there. And we have the yoke. Just cleaning off the old oils on the yoke. And the yoke is the 155 yoke. So this is kind of a hybrid reel. They're using parts from the Jigmaster, from the Surfmaster, from the Beachmaster, and they're producing a couple of unique pieces, being that that frame, and even within the frame they're using Jigmaster pieces. Okay, all of these pieces are going into the parts tray. You'll notice as I took the bridge out that there's a smooth screw with just a partial thread and a fully threaded screw. Those smooth screws go between the spring in the yoke, just like that. That's so that the spring doesn't catch on the threads. So remember that when you go to install, it does belong up top. Alright, the case is pretty clean. I've just been using a paper towel here. I like paper towels. They don't cost much, and you don't leave them around to spread any kind of junk that you may have picked up. Just cleaning this all out. And this is pretty darn clean inside right now. Some folks have been asking me about, do you do the ultrasonic cleaner? Well, you don't need to if you get it done by hand. I know Cons always wants me to show you the Oral-B toothbrush, and eventually I'll get around to doing that for cleaning gears. But in the meantime, if you can get it clean by hand, that's certainly adequate for your annual tune-up of the reel. That's a burring back there, just like we did on the other side. We're going to flood that burring with fishing reel oil. The eccentric gear, we can put some grease on, and that's the same blue grease, the Penn Precision Reel Grease. You can also put some oil behind the eccentric. That's riding in a little plastic hollowed groove here, so it doesn't hurt to just kind of walk that in and walk it out a couple of times, just to make sure that that stays lubricated and doesn't jam on you. Sometimes that part jams because it gets a lot of salt intrusion, and if that's the case, then you want to make sure you can actually take this out. You can remove the screw that's holding on the free spool lever, push the eccentric through and clean that out, but this one's doing fine. Okay, this has a bigger gear set, or a bigger gear than the 500, so it's got a higher speed. We're just going to remove the entire stack and place that off to the side. And then we're going to remove the gear sleeve so that we can clean out underneath there. And that gear sleeve is held in by a pin. Usually you can just poke that pin out. Sometimes you need to tap it out. And I don't have the hand strength today, so we're going to say we have to tap this one out. And I'll apologize if this is off camera, but I'm just going to take that pick. Just a quick 1-2, and it'll push that pin through. And make sure that you're using something that's got a smaller diameter than the hole where that pin comes through. Otherwise, you'll just scar that gear sleeve. All right, this is why we do it. We have old grease and oils in that shaft, and you don't want to just add more oil to it. You want to clean that off during your service. And now you know how to do that. We'll clean that off. You can see there's a little bit up top. And you want to pay attention to these two grooves here, because if you haven't been servicing the reel for a while, that's a place where grease tends to accumulate, and eventually it'll bog down. It'll almost act like a brake on the spin. So you want to make sure they get nice and clean. Now the paper towel did the trick there, but if it doesn't, go use a piece of steel wool. Again, just do kind of the same thing, but keep those grooves nice and clean. Once we do that, this looks like scarring, but we'll just take a quick ride with the steel wool just to get what we can off in terms of a tarnish. Now, unlike the Jigmaster, this bridge does not have the anti-reverse spring loaded on the bridge. That actually has to be loaded like the other Penn reel setups, where it's part of the external side plate as opposed to the bridge. Alright, just cleaning that out. Doesn't hurt to take a brush where you have the threads for that star adjuster. Just make sure they're nice and clean. I guess cons would say go ahead and use your Oral-B toothbrush there, but again, those are clean there. Alright, and then what we want to do is put a little bit of blue grease back on this and spread that around. Probably should use the other hand. It's got the glove on it. Spread it around a little bit. Make sure you have a nice even coating. Make sure that you've cleaned the inside of the gear sleeve. I'm not sure if I did, so now's a good time to go ahead and do that. I'm just going to use a cotton swab inside, and the answer is I didn't clean it, so it was a good thing to catch back up on that. Now the gear sleeve can go on the freshly lubricated one, and you should be able to pull this in with the pliers. Sometimes you're able to push it in with your hand strength. I don't like banging things with a hammer, even a dead blow hammer, which I kind of used there to get this out. But make sure when you put this pin in that you clear this ridge, because if you don't clear that ridge, and I'm not sure I'm cleared here, you won't be able to get the main gear back on. The tolerances are that tight on those shoulders. Alright, I think I just pulled it in there. Alright, so that's the gear sleeve. Turns nice and easy now. Alright, we're going to take the drag stack out here. We have HT100s in this. So the way the drag stack works is it's a drag washer, a keyed washer which has two flat sides internally, another drag washer, then we have the eared washer which has the circle inside but two prongs on each side, then we have the third drag washer, and then we have the top washer. These drag washers are still okay. They're HT100. As long as you can see the cross hatching in these drag washers, you've got plenty of material on there. If you see that they're smooth, then you want to go ahead and replace those. While I have this open, then I'm going to clean out the internal channel. I'm going to spray down the perimeter of the gear. And then I'm just going to use a brush. This is a soft brush. I just want to get anything that might be trapped in that gear. I want to get that cleaned out before I reapply new grease. And there we go. I want to do the same thing on the pinion gear, and this is the pinion gear from the 500, the Jigmaster. This one's clean all by itself. Don't need to do anything, but just for the point of illustration, I'll do that. And you want to make sure there's no bends or chips or broken teeth in these, otherwise it would hinder performance. You'd get some pretty ugly noises with that. Okay, I'm going to get that oil out of the channel there, whatever overspray there might have been. Clean up the back of this gear, and then we can take the grease, make sure that we get the teeth on this greased in a couple of different spots. It'll distribute itself as you go cranking around. You don't have to get every tooth packed with gear grease. And the reason for that is if you pack it all too much, it's just going to throw off when it comes to spinning. It's not designed that way. All right, I'm going to use Cal's Universal Drag Grease for those drag washers. They're HT100s. So what I do is I dip the washer into the grease. I use my gloved hand as a tool. I spread the grease around on both sides, and then I grab a paper towel, wipe off the excess. The idea behind the grease is to keep the fabric from tearing. It's not going to add any more max drag or anything. It's just going to keep it from tearing or fraying by keeping it lubricated. If it dries out, it wears excessively, and it frays from time to time. All right, the first one in is the keyed washer, if I didn't make note of that. The middle washer is the eared washer. That goes next. And we're going to go up top with the last one. Rub that in nicely. You don't want to put too much on here. You don't want to over lube it because that's only going to squeeze out. So the whole idea with that star adjuster is to put pressure on those. And if you squeeze it out, then that's not going to do any good either. All right, we're done with the grease. Let's go put that back to the side there. And what we need to do then is one more thing here. We just want to clean up the yoke and the jack. Put some of these tools back to the side. Just going to use my steel wool to kind of polish up the yoke. And it's called the yoke because it looks like the yoke that an oxen or a team of horses or something might have. And we're going to make sure that we grease both sides of this, particularly there where the gear is going to ride. And then we want to insert the gear and make sure that we get good grease on the gear as well. And when we go to install this, the part of the gear that has the slot in it, not the flat side, the slot faces outwards because that's going to accept the spool. Okay, it's fairly straightforward now. We take the two springs for the yoke and those go into cavities on the side plate. I just looked and saw that I didn't pay attention to that jack, so a quick little scrub down with the steel wool will remove any dried grease that's on that. Wipe that down. Okay, so we have the two springs. The yoke assembly goes on. You push down on the yoke assembly, and then you can load the jack. In this case, it loads from the right side, and you want to make sure that the stud in the case, and the groove on the jack line up. I'm going to just go do that again. I tilted it. Kind of fell down. That's all right. No big deal. Push down again. Load the jack. And we're good there. All right. Next thing up then, we want to install the bridge. And as I mentioned, on this bridge, you don't have the anti-reverse dog setup that you do on the 500. This is an independent one, so we'll show you how to do that. Get the fully threaded screw. The fully threaded screw belongs on the right side of the case. We're going to put the bridge assembly in. We're going to push down on our yoke assembly again. Put the bridge assembly in and rotate it to where it's perpendicular to the bottom of the reel. You're going to take your screw and you're going to mount your anti-reverse dog so that it intersects with one of the notches in the back of that gear sleeve, and it creates a cavity here, and that's where that little spring goes. And you just need to put pressure on one side and kind of just wiggle it in, and be careful, it's a spring, it will shoot if you're not paying a lot of attention to it. Once you do that, you can complete the rotation of the bridge. This thing is going to sit on two studs. Just need to make sure that those studs are in. Sometimes the best way to do that is to push your jack down. Mount your two studs, and once you have that flush on the sides, you can go ahead and tighten that screw that's holding that anti-reverse dog. Now don't tighten it down all the way. You've got other screws to put in there, and the studs are going to hold it for a good part of it, but just to be certain, leave a little bit of slack in those screws so that it's easier to do. So right now we just have that screw is off center. This is a good time to do this, show you this. That screw is off center a little bit because there's a shoulder of the yoke. So use your pin to center that yoke so that you can align the screw better. and then you can get it to set. I like to do the two screws up top that go through those springs after I put that jack screw in. And again, I'm not tightening them down fully. I'm leaving these with a little bit of space here. I think that's the case screw. That's the case screw. Okay, and then we'll come down here and put this last one in, the bridge screw. And once I have all 4 of them in, I'll tighten this one, and I'll come up kind of north, south, east, west. Sort of an approach here. And then before I go any further, I want to turn this. I want to make sure it's turning nicely. I want to make sure that I have the anti-reverse dog. You can probably see that. I want to make sure that my free spool release is working. All of that before I go and bolt it back onto the reel, because it doesn't make any sense to put it on the reel only to find out a piece of that isn't working properly. All right, with that on, then we've greased our spool, cleaned our cavity there. We can go ahead and line this up. Just like that. 3 of the screws are in place already, so we're going to do the same thing. We're going to go in opposing directions here. I'm going to tighten this one down. Come over here, tighten this one. 3 of them stayed in, 1 didn't. That's alright, I have it in my parts tray, so that's another reason why I use that parts tray there. Come over here, do the 3rd. And grab that one remaining screw for the crossbar. And that's the installation of the case. So what have we done so far? We've taken the reel apart completely. I've shown you the mechanics of it. We dealt with the non-gear side first by checking out that bearing, oiling it, cleaning it up, greasing the little click tongue, greasing the shafts on the spool, and then coming over and paying attention to the main bridge. We showed you how to take apart the drag system, how to lubricate the drags, how to reinstall, particularly using the anti-reverse dog. So with that then, these 2 tension washers are going on. And we'll take our star adjuster, which we cleaned up earlier. Make sure that is on. And we're almost at the point now where we're going to do a little test to make sure that it works fine. Alright, then the handle goes on. The handle screw. The handle screw is a bigger screw. This is the one for the 6.0. It's actually marked 114, which is the Penn Senator 6.0 screw. So like I said, this is kind of a hybrid reel. It's got pieces across Penn's model line from over time, which is fine. You don't need to reinvent this every time. Then you need to align your groove in the screw with where the set screw rides. Get that set screw in here. So a little bit of trouble with it, but we will prevail. And then we'll go to ride, see what the tune-up has done for the performance. We have oiled bearings, we have lube drag washers, and where we had a hum when we started this, there is no hum any longer. So that was probably attributed to the bearings just kind of squeaking and being a little noisy. We'll release. Yeah, look at that. Look at the spin on that. And of course, if you want to adjust the spool tension, you can do that from this piece on the side here, the bearing. But this is in ready to go fishing condition. I want to tighten those drags just to make sure that everything is fine there, nice and tight. And back them off. I don't recommend leaving the drag tight if you're not using the reel. But there you go. So this is the Penn Mag 990, Power Mag 990. It's a beautiful reel. Thank you to Patrick for sending that one in. Thank you for sending that 10.0 Senator in as well. Got a nice clean reel here, ready to get some line on it and ready for the fall fishing season. So I hope you've enjoyed the video. Again, thank you to the first responders and frontline personnel. If you have a question about this reel or any reel, please leave it in the comment section below. If you would like to see more, please subscribe. I post frequently, and that way you won't miss any of my projects. And if you have a reel that needs to be repaired and you don't have the